are back once again. How's the room? Are we stressed? No, yes. We are stressed and we're enjoying it because it makes us better, and yes. Now let's all give a good cheer to get us excited for the next person. Yes, yes, yes. There's the excitement, there's the energy that we need, because there's nothing more exciting than implementing technology, coming from someone who works in technology. Real quick, because I mentioned technology, I have to share a joke with you. How many software developers did it take to screw in a light bulb? None. That's a hardware problem. Great, great. We're laughing. We're there. We're energized. We're excited. So I'd like to bring up another person to this amazing stage. Our next presenter is a professor at Sinclair College and also the owner at One Love LLC. She's here to talk about implementing technology into a firm. So without further ado, give an incredible warm welcome to the one and only Myla Cardona-Jones.
Hello, everyone. How are you today? Good. Oh, I get some excitement over there. That's good. It's 2:15. I'm glad to see people are so excited. All right, so as you can see, I'm going to be talking to you today about implementing new technology, best practices to onboard and enroll your team. Now, you heard in the introduction that my name is Myla Cardona-Jones, but in addition to that, for me, as far as onboarding is concerned, oops, having a technical glitch here. There we go. And I teach at Sinclair College, but as far as onboarding is concerned, we have to go a few steps back. We can't just talk about how to onboard technology at the firm without first talking about why it would be helpful for us to really make more of an effort to onboard our students at that level. So at Sinclair, I am currently teaching classes like legal research and writing, domestic violence, litigation. But in addition to that, what I consider to be my kind of core class that I teach is legal technology. When I was hired on, I was hired to teach all of those classes exclusively. And the thing about our actual program in general in Dayton, Ohio, is that we are the only AB certified program in Dayton, Ohio. So this is a big deal. A lot of employers look to us to produce the top legal professionals, the top paralegals, and a lot of our paralegals will actually go on to law school because they have such a great foundation and they want to keep going in the legal field. So really, legal technology, as we all know, that's where the money is, okay? If you know how to use the tools, then you are going to be an asset to your firm, and you're going to be an asset to your clients, thereby making you more money. So my goal as a professor when I started was to go in and really have this kind of focus of compassion and dedication and commitment, and I was just going to take the tools that I knew how to use and teach the students, and they were just going to pick up quickly, they were going to get it, and everybody was going to go off and do great. I saw them taking this education to the next level, taking that leap of faith and having even more students going on to law school, becoming lawyers, and then from that point, becoming judges. And at some point, someone was going to write an autobiography and dedicate me in it, right? Like, I taught you this, great, so that's where we're at. Except, in reality, it didn't quite work that way. Now, here's a couple of things that I'll do as a backstory. First of all, I am a graduate of the program that I taught in, and I did exactly what I was hoping a lot of my students would do, is after I became a paralegal, I wanted to do more, so I went on to law school. So I walked in there saying, these are all the steps you can take, and we're going to get you there, and let's do this. However, I was still teaching with older platforms. We had not done the research that was necessary in order to really prepare our students so that they could be as valuable as possible in their law firms. So we were teaching some of the dated things that really the market no longer utilized. And now we had to start asking the question of why. Why was this happening? How did we get to this point? We're the only ABA certified program in Dayton, Ohio, and we're not teaching what is necessary. And the first thing that I realized is that we were missing that link. We hadn't been keeping in communication enough with our graduates, with the people who had finished the program. So that's what I did. My first step was I reached back out to our graduates and I said, hey, how's it going? can you tell me some of the things that you are currently learning or that you're currently using in your law firm that are helpful to you? We need to get back in touch with the Dayton market. We need to understand what we should be using and what we should be teaching in the classroom. And they provided me with a great amount of insight as to what kind of platforms are really, really helpful now. And pretty much none of them were what we were teaching in the program. In addition to that, they also said something else that was missing for us was the why. We basically just went through the program and we learned all these platforms, but we never were told why they would be helpful for us in the law firm or in the business we were going to work for. So there was that missing connection, right? We got taught these platforms, but we never really knew why we were going to use them, so we really didn't pay much attention. Well, that's a problem. So at that point, I realized that what's happening is they're not learning about what's trending, therefore they can't be beneficial to their firms. So we get to the point where we have to do a little bit of research. So I worked with our chair, a lot of the key players at the college, and said, this is the deal. If we want to really take ourselves seriously, we want everybody to come to us because we are producing the top paralegals, we are producing the top legal professionals. We need to advance our platforms. We need to become the leaders in that knowledge. So we did an extensive amount of research over the summer of 2016, reached out to a lot of different providers and asked, hey, do you have any kind of an educational track for your platforms? Do you have something that we can use so that we can implement them into our program so we can prepare our students so they can be more valuable in their law firms and in the businesses that they're going to work for? And thankfully, a lot of them were very much helpful. Some of them that didn't even have educational tracks or educational materials made them available for us and then provided us with these platforms and student logins so that we could teach the students what we needed. And that final step here was also reaching out to the employers. So looking over the past 40 years of our program, seeing what do the employers want? So there was also that disconnect. We weren't interacting enough with the actual employers. So we went back to the courts, we went into the hospitals, the insurance companies, banks, other financial institutions, and a lot of different law firms and said, how do you need your paralegals to work? What do you need from them? What are your expectations? And so we finally kind of came to this point where we realized this. We hadn't been necessarily doing our job to onboard our students in a way that we could make it an easier process for the employer. We've got to go back and we've got to reevaluate. We've got to do a better job of enrolling our team, our students, so that they can be more beneficial as they move on. So this is how it transformed. As I told you previously, and I went through the program, you would walk into a legal technology course, you would learn the platforms, and you would go on about your business. And this was the new look. Students walk in on the first day in my class. I come in after them right at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whenever the class starts. I set my briefcase down, and I say, hello, my name is Myla Cardona-Jones. Welcome to Legal Technology. I will be your attorney for the next 8 to 16 weeks, depending upon how long the class was going to be. I need you to go ahead and open up these platforms, Lexis Advance, Clio, Fastcase, whatever we're going to cover for that day. We've got work to do. And then I would click to that. What do you all think the reaction of my students were? Maybe something like that? It's pretty much how they reacted. Every single student was like, whoa, whoa, way too much, it's way too early for all of this seriousness. But as a part of the research that I did, I realized that a lot of people are switching to this simulated classroom environment. And that was something that was missing from our program. Basically, on the first day, go ahead and start onboarding your students and teaching them as if they were paralegals, as if they were the legal professionals doing all of the work in the law firm. So we realized that, yes, that's going to create some initial panic for our students, and there is such a thing as technology anxiety. I wasn't very aware of it because I've always been very tech savvy. Prior to my role as a professor, I worked for Lexis. So I worked with AmLaw 100 and 200 firms and helped with the onboarding process for them. So I was never really afraid of technology. So I also had to become aware of that. There was going to be students who were not going to be as tech savvy, weren't going to be as open to some of these new platforms that we were going to introduce. but nonetheless, we have to do it. So the next slide was when I would introduce to them some of the things that they were going to learn. I can't just tell you this is a law firm, but not tell you what you're going to learn, but also give them the why component. So yes, you're going to carry many, many, many hats. You're going to have many arms in the legal field. But first, let me introduce you to some of the platforms, like Clio. This is this integrated one-stop shop solution that we're going to learn. We're going to cover a lot of different legal research platforms, Lexis Advance, Westlaw, Fastcase. We're going to talk about CaseMaker. Prior to that, we had only covered one legal research platform, which was Lexis Advance. That's all we would talk about. Well, that's great for all of our graduates that go on and work for a firm that has Lexis, but what about the ones that have the others? So we realized that we were missing there and not showing them multiple things and making them more valuable and more marketable in their field. In addition to that, we are going to integrate different types of PDF forms, Foxit and Adobe. We're also going to talk about Outlook. Prior to me starting teaching in this program, we did not cover Outlook. And something that, when I spoke with the employers, they said is, these students don't know how to use Outlook. That is a problem. We do everything in Outlook, or we do everything in Gmail. So we integrated that. Something that we also realized is that we were dealing with a new type of student. Okay, we're dealing with a new type of student base. And what we had here was a situation where this generation was no longer answering a phone and talking to people. They didn't even know how to leave a good voicemail. So we had to also incorporate that into the program and say, we're going to talk about this because you all have cell phones. Nobody calls anymore and says, hello, Mr. Jones. I think my generation honestly might have been the last generation that had that, right? Where you call and you pick up the phone and you have to be polite in order to get to the next person. They're not doing that. So we incorporated all of these different things and decided that this is the end goal that we want to achieve. We want you to be marketable. We want you to be successful, and we want you to move on. But we had to do that by taking a moment, stopping, and listening to what was the need. And I think sometimes when you think about this moving forward a little bit, when we think about the employers, when we think about law firms and businesses and hospitals, they're not always doing what they should to make sure that they're listening to the needs of the people. So you might be using platforms in your firms that are a little dated. And the reality is, you could be doing a lot more and making even more money by advancing that and being open to that. There's also a component of tailoring that needs to happen. Do I have educators in the room? Anybody who teaches? Okay, great. Hello. So there's an important aspect of tailoring because each semester, my students are completely different. I don't know if you all have the same situation, but they're just very different, and they're different learners, and even within that group. So you also have to be open to tailoring the different platforms to meet those needs. Sometimes for our older students, they're not as tech savvy, whereas you put platforms in the hands of an 18-year-old, they're going to pick it up quickly. So just recognizing those things, that there might be a learning curve for others. And then having these things available. So when you are a legal tech program and you focus on that, you have to have the technology available for them to use it. So reaching out to those providers and offering up options and giving us the login so that these students can actually work with them so that they know. Because if I'm just sitting here and I'm doing a presentation, I'm talking them through it, they're not really going to understand how to work with the platform. And then we implemented them into other classes. So not just are you going to learn about these platforms in legal technology, you're all going to see them again. You're going to see them in probate when you're using forms. You're going to see them in legal research and writing. You're going to see them in family law. You're going to continue to work with all of these things for the next some odd years that you're with us so that you have a full understanding of how to use them. And so basically, we're asked and answered. There's been a need. They've asked us to meet that need, and we've answered it by completely changing and revamping how we educate our future legal professionals. So I decided to do the simulation classroom environment after a little bit of research because I realized that that had a higher percentage rate of success. So again, if we're going into the classroom and we're starting off from day one saying, you are already a paralegal, I'm going to treat you as such, you are going to do your work and report to me as if this was a law firm, they're already kind of understanding what a process looks like in the regular environment. And so it leads to these types of outcomes. First of all, you're making the students feel more welcome as they see their end goal already there. Oh, I'm already a paralegal? Great. I'll start to treat myself as such, and I'll take this very seriously. You're orienting them to this environment, which also allows you to increase the comfort level. And then you're setting these ground rules. You're saying, well, if I'm treating you like a paralegal, please keep in mind that you are to do work as one. So we're going to really get to work. We are going to be very, very interactive. You are going to learn and adapt to that. And the agree of contract. Find a way to help participants suspend disbelief, which is basically saying, if I go and stand up here and I tell you all these things that are great and wonderful, but I don't show you, they don't believe. There's no buy-in with that. So then we get to this point where now our paralegals are at the end of the semester and they're becoming interns and they're going into the law firm. And there was a huge change in their performance. They hit the ground running. Literally, they get into these law firms and start to wow and impress all of the legal professionals that are there. They just can't believe how much they've learned. They know how to use Lexis. They know how to use Westlaw. They're talking to us about these platforms, this Clio. What is that? Tell me more. It is a fantastic kind of an outcome. Not to mention, it's because we started using this kind of a process. And it makes the process easier for the employer to then onboard the students. So essentially what we're saying here is we all kind of need to work together as far as an onboarding process is concerned. Because if we're teaching the students the platforms that you need, it's going to make it eons easier for you when they come and they're becoming employed. So we've got to kind of work together in this effort. And what do I mean by process? What is process understanding? Well, ultimately, we're talking about the critical sources of variability, the fact that they've been identified. And that was when I went and reached out to the employers, reached out to the graduates, and said, what is needed? What should we be doing? And just taking a moment and really speaking with all of the employers and understanding what the needs were in order to identify and be able to explain that. And then being able to manage the process. So what you talk about when you manage a process, sometimes when you train on a platform in a classroom, you don't necessarily show them all of the different ways that you can utilize the platform. But we made sure to change that. So sure, we're going to have scenarios where we have a client who has to go to trial because he committed a crime. So in that regard, we're going to use Lexis to look up cases and statutes, right? We're going to talk about maybe discovery. We're going to talk about how to e-file. But we're also going to have a client that needs to start a will. We're also going to talk about a client who wants to start up a business. We're going to talk about a client who wants to have a patent and needs help with that. Because when you talk about the different ways in which you will utilize those platforms, the students have a better understanding of the magnitude that they offer. And I noticed that when I looked back at my time in the program, a lot of the things that we learned were really only about litigation. And that's not all there is to the legal world, right? We all know that. There were actually times when I can remember working for Lexis when I would call to try and onboard somebody or train them on a platform, and they'd say, oh, I have no need for that. I have no need for this platform at all because it doesn't benefit me. Well, maybe no one has told you that it can be helpful. Because the reality is you can find a lot of what you need. You're a probate attorney, they've got probate forms. You can get some help with that. And then at the end of that, we're getting to a point where we are accurately and reliably predicting what the outcomes of their education will be. Well, now we're able to really tell our employers, these are the things that you should expect to see from a paralegal student coming out of this program. These are the things that you should expect for them as far as results, delivery, and outcomes. And you're creating this carve-in and carve-out. You're allowing for exceptions. And we have a lot of students who currently work as paralegals, but their employer told them to go back and get an education. The employer told them, I need you to go back to this program and learn more about legal technology and learn more about other areas of the law. So we have them also incorporating some of their experience and saying, hey, I work in this area of law. Can you just talk to us for 5 minutes, 10 minutes about how I would use it this way? And that's great, because incorporating those non-traditional and traditional students into it provides for a really great work environment. And so ultimately, there was a huge increase in hireability. Now, this is a national percentage. On a national level, when students go into a firm or any kind of an employer, 35.3% of the employers at full-time entry-level college hires came from their internship programs. 35.3%, that's great. 3 years ago, for our program, that number was 50%. So we were already doing pretty well. 50% of our students were remaining on in the place where they were interning. And when we polled this last summer, we were up to 70%. 70% of our students, because we switched to this process and to this simulated classroom kind of law firm environment, are now being hired on for their employers. Now, they're not all keeping or accepting the job, but at least they're being offering the job. Maybe they've worked for the semester and realized that's not actually what they want to do. But 70%. And so this same practice goes with non-recent graduates. Same practice can be used in a law firm. So basically, when you are going into this process and you're getting ready to onboard a new associate, or maybe somebody that comes from another firm, they've been working there for 10 years, these are some questions you might want to ask them. You might want to say, what type of office environment did you come from? You'll want to know the answer to that so that you have an idea of maybe what kind of work you'll need to do in order to get them acclimated to this new culture. You might want to ask them, what technology, software, platforms did you utilize most? Because I can tell you another thing about one of the biggest gripes I would have. If I had to train someone on Lexis that used Westlaw for 10 years, they were not happy. Not happy at all. And you want to know that. What did your previous employer use? Because they might have a certain set of ways that they go about things, folders set up, and they're just not happy that they have to switch over. And you need to know that. What did you feel the most comfortable with? Because again, maybe you offer a number of different platforms so you can make those available to that employee to make it easier for them to onboard and transition into this new role. Also, are you comfortable adapting to new technology quickly? Because at your firm, sure, today we're using this, but next week we'll be using something totally completely different. And we want to make sure that you're going to be open to those changes and open to the onboarding process and the emails that are going to come in and saying, you have 10 days to train on this new platform. And in addition to that, how important do you believe technology is to the legal industry? And if they can't really provide a good answer for that question, if they don't see how much technology has really impacted this industry, you might want to have a talk to them. Or they might not be the best fit for you. Because at this step of the game, if people are not realizing how much we are impacted by legal technology, then we've got a problem. And you ask these questions because, yes, they've been working as a patent attorney for 7 years, and that's wonderful, but are they still learning? Because something that happens with a lot of us as we become legal professionals and we become a little seasoned in the work we're doing, we come with a process, and we're not necessarily open to changing that process. And it becomes very challenging as you continue to see at conferences like these where there's so many things out there and available to us that make our jobs faster. And if we're still using that older process, we might not be keeping up. And yes, they're open to the fact that the process may be different and that there might be a learning curve, okay? Because again, if you have the person coming that used a platform for 10 years, you have to be open to the fact that it's going to take them a little bit longer to jump up and be ready to try something new. So all of this understanding will stem from technology, as we discussed. Because technology is taking the driver's seat. Technology is what's really driving all of the decisions that we make in the law firm, in the insurance company, at the hospitals. And if we don't have people that are employed also taking that seriously, then we're not going to succeed. And so when students learn to appreciate platforms before hire, okay, so going back to my paralegal students who've now had this full-on experience, these years of interaction with all of these different platforms in a simulated law firm environment, what typically happens is that somebody gets a phone call. Can anybody tell me who that might be? I have no prize. Well, it's probably going to be the people who created the platforms. So we're people who support the different platforms. Anybody in the room? I know a lot of you are downstairs. Okay. So basically, Clio's going to get a call. Fastcase is going to get a call. Westlaw is going to get a call. Adobe is going to get a call. Why? Because they're going into these firms and they're saying, hey, this is the thing that I use and I support it and I really liked it and I know how to use it well. And a lot of our market is a little older, a little seasoned. So a lot of our paralegals are actually going in there and saying what works, and they're buying into it. They're saying, well, that sounds great. Let's try it. Let's get a demo started. I actually have 5 different students who have reached back out to me and said, I really liked this particular platform. Can you come in and just show these to our senior attorneys? Just kind of show them the power of it? Because currently they're using something that's really not working. Would you be open to that? And I have. And so now they are kind of leading the way as far as what's going to work. So we're talking about a process. And in order to fully and successfully onboard, there has to be a process. And the first thing is to introduce and listen to what is the need. So maybe at your firm, you might want to go and look at what's leading in that particular jurisdiction, in that particular area, and meet the needs of also the clients that you serve. If you are dealing with patents, you might have to look and do even more research to know what would be most beneficial to you. The second thing is to express your vision as a possible future. So if you're not the person necessarily making the decisions, if you see something or if you learn something here at this conference that you think would be really beneficial to your firm, take that back. Take that back to the people that make those decisions and say, I found some really valuable things, and at the end of the day, we're trying to grow. A lot of people that I talk to will come to me and ask about when they're trying to grow in a new practice area. How do I pitch that and talk about those things? Well, you have to show some data, certainly. You have to show some research. But in addition to that, if you know someone that can talk about it, that you can get into the hands of that CEO or the partner and tell them why it's helpful and why their business has grown because of it, that's some great buy-in. They can see the future and that sustainability. And the last thing is crafting your buy-in story. You might have to change it depending upon who you know that you're going to be talking to. You might have to craft it even within different practice areas. Because you might have to say, well, hey, for my non-litigants, this is why this platform will be very helpful. Let me sit down and walk you through the reasons why we should implement this. For my litigators, let me show you what this will do as far as you finding lots of research and lots of case law that's going to be helpful. So let me pause for a second and tell you about a quick story. As I mentioned, I used to work for Lexus. And not only that, but I think that's pretty much the reason why I got the job with my current employer, because they knew that research was something that they were lacking in. They weren't really teaching the students everything that they needed to know. There were still tons of students that would come out of the program and they would say, well, I shepherdized and it had a red stop sign, so therefore it was bad law. Not really fully vetting the case and knowing what that really meant. So when I realized that I kind of had the weight of that on my back and I had that responsibility to have them fully understand it, I did start not only just reaching out to the employers, but I also started having them come in and speak. So again, it's talking about tying in that connection with all of the legal providers, the law firms, the insurance companies, and the hospitals. So I had them come in and talk about the different platforms that were being used to show them, you see, these are the things that they're using for that increased buy-in power. So at every level, there should be some sort of a buy-in story. And for me, it was, yes, we're going to learn these things. We're going to have a simulated environment. But I also want to make sure you know that what I'm telling you is going to be beneficial to you. And that's why I'm inviting these people to come and talk to you up front so you know. Now, since 2016, we've actually had 5 students who have gone on to law school. And then that poses a different problem. Has anybody recently graduated from law school? Okay. Well, I can tell you that from personal experience, they're no longer teaching a lot as far as legal platforms are concerned. That whole course is kind of being missed. Yes, you have a legal research and writing requirement, but they are not at all telling you how to use these platforms. So a lot of people are graduating from law school, and they're going into these firms, and they're being hired, and there's an expectation there from the attorneys and the partners that you should be knowing how to use these platforms. And I will tell you that the majority of the time, that's not the case. So I tell you this because if you are the decision maker, if you're the person that's monitoring the process as far as onboarding is concerned, please keep that in mind too. Students are learning in a different way. I made it a commitment to my paralegal students that they would learn all of the platforms, but that's just not the case everywhere you go. So if you have that expectation, and if you're wanting them to learn a certain way, make sure that you're looking in and tapping into those educational environments that you know most of your new hires will come from, and ask them to do that. And if they're not willing, keep that in mind for when you go to the onboarding process. Perhaps allot an extra hour of time for them to learn Adobe, if they need to do metadata, if they need to redact. Make sure that you have those carve-outs and make those exceptions when you know that that hasn't been something that they're necessarily learning in their educational environments. So quick little test. We're about halfway in, and I want to just check in and make sure we're learning. This is another way that I make sure that my students are learning in the classroom, and we play a game called Kahoot. So in order to do this, and actually, I have to link out to this, but everybody should be able to do it, and you need to just get on your phone. Basically, this is just another way for you all to see some of the things that we can do as far as technology is concerned, because we have so much and everybody has a phone. So if you go ahead and get logged in, and I'm going to join you and play along, even though I already know some of the answers. It's a way for you to create games, quizzes, surveys, anything that you would like to kind of pass out in the masses to people. So this was something that I actually used when I reached out to some of the employers and some of the students. I decided just maybe calling might not get it done. Let's make it a fun kind of a learning experience. So I created surveys on Kahoot and asked them to answer the questions. You can also turn it on to make it anonymous so that I don't necessarily know who I'm getting the results from. And it just made for kind of a way for them to enjoy the process of answering all of these questions in order to help us implement the programs that we needed at the school. So you will see a series of questions. We're going to get started here. So here's the first question, and you have 20 seconds to answer it out of a total possible of 1,000 points. So anybody who's been to trivia night at maybe a BW3s or something like that knows how this works? All right, so now you see the results here. So 10 people got it correct, 2 people didn't. And essentially, what I did when I was asking these questions is I would take the answers and see who was answering them the way they were. And what was interesting is that a lot of the research providers were answering similarly. The firms that dealt with IP or patent law were answering in the same way. So that shows us that they have specific needs, and that was a great way of being able to represent that. So we'll go to the next question. All right, 9 people got it correct, 7 people. We'll see who's in the lead now. I feel like that might have changed some things a little bit. All right, Anne took the lead. I'm not sure who that is. If you'd like to self-disclose, that's fine. If not, we'll keep you anonymous. So this was a question from what I just mentioned, maybe about 7 minutes ago. 40.3% of employers' full-time entry-level college hires came from their internship programs. All right, 10 of you listened to me, thank you. Does anybody want to tell them what the correct answer is? Do you remember? 35.3%. All right, next question. All right, so just so you know, this was a trick question. I was waiting to see how many of you got that right. A lot of you did, but clearly you all know what would be considered a dated legal research platform somewhat, right? So Lexis Advanced, we still use Clio, Microsoft Office Suite. All of those are still very beneficial. But when we reached out to the leading providers and to the firms and we said, is this still working, or are you all still utilizing this? Many people said no, so we did kind of sunset that particular platform. Next question. And this is a check all three that apply. All right, so we've got a mix-up here. I'm sure this is going to change our results, but you can see all the three that are correct. Leading, oh, me still in the lead. All right, next question. Perfect. I'm glad that most of us got that one correct. Absolutely. Employers should be communicating more with their educational institutions so that we are definitely teaching all of the new hires what you actually need in order to smooth your process, your onboarding process. All right, and this is the last question. What do we think? What do we think? We talked about the importance of this and how a lot of the students who learn the platforms in the programs will then take them, and the answer is true. Yep. So studies have shown that 30% of students hired on at firms will implement workflow solutions learned while in school. So I don't know if that's going to be a shocking number to any of you all, but that's a big number, right? So if you're thinking about that, the type of people that you're hiring will actually drive and influence the platforms that you're going to go on to implement into your work environment. It's a pretty big one. All right, so let's see who the big winner is. Me with 6,609 points, on to Bill, and then CH. So congratulations, round of applause. I'm sure you're getting lots of fun things at the conference. Awesome. All right, so let's wrap this up in a sense of let's kind of cover what we talked about and summarize and talk about from an employer standpoint. We're moving at a rate of the speed of light as far as legal technology is concerned. When we talk about what Microsoft Office looked like 20 years ago, when we talk about what these legal research platforms have looked like, when we talk about all of the new solutions, we continue to advance in a way that we have no idea what we'll see in 10 years, but we know it'll be different and we know it'll be nuanced. So a lot of the old habits that you have in your firms and in your legal environments will probably need to change if they haven't already. And it's okay. And so as far as an onboarding process is concerned, what I would recommend is that you go back to the people who make those decisions and ask them, what is the process that we currently have in place when we go in and we're trying to get our new hires implemented, onboarded, and what process do we use? Ask those questions, and if you're the person that does the onboarding, ask yourself, what do I currently have in place as far as making sure that any new person that comes into this firm feels like they understand the culture, but they also are very comfortable with the things that they're going to be utilizing as far as legal technology is concerned. Because the ultimate goal here is for us to be sustainable. Sustainability is the most important thing to any legal firm, to any legal professional. Because if we are no longer able to use the platforms, then we become obsolete. And when we have an environment of employees who feel comfortable with the technology that we're using, studies have shown that they are more likely to remain in that environment. Instead, when they've learned something, and then they go to a new employer that uses none of those platforms, they are less likely to remain. And it all starts with how they're educated. So reach out to those educational institutions, send some emails, make those connections. What's interesting is that a lot of attorneys become adjunct professors as well. So you'll have an idea of the types of things that are being taught in the educational institutions that will typically lead to the interns. So kind of pair up with those people and ask those questions and say, should we be changing or should we ask them to change? Because that could be kind of a tough decision, but it might be a necessary one. And ultimately, make sure that you're still learning as well. So coming to a conference like this obviously shows that you have an interest in learning about what's leading, what's out there, but continue to be open to a process that what was working 20 years ago may not work now, and look to the future in that same regard. We continue to learn new things and build on our past knowledge, and a lot of us as legal professionals use somewhat of a scientific method or approach to the things that we do. So when we think about it like that, we think about a series of steps or a process that allows us to prove or disprove a hypothesis. And if we've been able to prove that over 35.3% of students who become interns because they have adapted to a process will then be offered employment, and if we've been able to prove that 40% of those students, or 30% of those students are actually shaping what kind of technology is going to be used at these firms, then there should be some buy-in with that. There should be some buy-in there. And everyone's formula is not going to be the same. So I recognize that different firms will have a different culture and different need as far as technology is concerned, which is why it is very difficult for me to say fully, here's a step-by-step process of what will work for you, because it's very unique and specific. And Dayton, in our market, it worked for us because we were able to connect with those legal professionals and ask them what the needs were, and then incorporate that back into our learning environment. And that could be a little different for each and every one of you, but it's certainly worth a shot, certainly worth giving it a try. I want to take some time to answer any questions that anyone might have. Again, because I know that there might be some specific needs or differences in the different law firms or corporations you work for. So if you have any questions for me about a process, platforms that might be beneficial in my research, what I uncovered as far as what's leading right now, I'm more than willing to answer any of those. Yes, ma'am.
What if you have an older boss that might not be interested in new technology and they might see the benefits, but they're still on the fence about committing to learning something new or taking on new processes that are obviously more efficient to the rest of us, but you can't get that buy-in, and it's ultimately their decision?
Yeah, that's one of the number one problems that we have. And certainly in our market, it sounds like it's a problem for you too. One of the things that is really nice about pretty much all of the platforms that you're going to see here and beyond is that they do offer some sort of a trial. And so I'd say get them using whatever you think that's going to be helpful in the firm, have them try it, and for free. Everybody likes free, especially legal professionals. Sometimes there's going to be like a 30-day or a 60-day trial where you get to come in, and then they'll have someone from their team who can kind of onboard and show you how it would be beneficial specific to the practice areas that you work in. And I find that that can be very helpful because certainly you're not going to just take that leap knowing how much some of these things cost without really knowing why it's going to be beneficial to you. I think a month is a good amount of time to kind of give you an idea of the projected future growth that you could see. So that would be my recommendation. Trials. Yes.
So I appreciate so much what you said about learning styles and really knowing your audience. And I was wondering if you could talk about the day-to-day best practices for educating a group of student attorneys or paralegals. We do a lot of training at the University of St. Thomas of law students in the clinic, and it's nearly impossible to do so with all of these different learning styles in the same room. So I was wondering if you could just reflect on some of the day-to-day things you do to reinforce quality control and making sure that they are really getting the hang of it, so that we are maintaining the integrity of our client files, but also trying to introduce them and keep them on the edge of developing these skills.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I've implemented a number of different strategies in the classroom. So again, as you mentioned, I touched on, we have the non-traditional student. We have, some of our older students that are coming back, and this is their second or third career. We've got the single mother who really doesn't have time for school, but knows that she needs to go to school in order to help her, family dynamic. And then just our younger demographic that comes straight out of high school. And so knowing that they're going to be a little bit more or less advanced depending upon their circumstances, in addition to just offering that simulated work environment, what that actually does is it allows me to have them do a little bit of the work by themselves. So 30 minutes of the class is always dedicated to them trying these things out by themselves, and then it allows me to walk around the room and kind of see where everyone is at to gauge, are you really grasping these concepts that I just kind of walked you through? Do you understand the steps that I'm telling you? Do you understand really why shepherdizing is so important, or were you just nodding your head in approval because you didn't want me to call on you? Things like that. We also offer now a hybrid environment. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that structure, but some students' their success rates increase when they don't have the commitment of having to go into class every week. And so some of the people that we mentioned for that non-traditional track, the mom who has to work, she's a little bit more comfortable when she knows she only has to go to class 6 out of the 12 weeks as opposed to every single week. And so putting some of those materials online. I have other students who are really good about watching videos. So I pretty much offer a video for every single thing I train on. I will try to either get the video straight from the provider and say, hey, what do you have as far as a really good thing that they can go back and watch so they can kind of do the step-by-step themselves. If that doesn't exist, then I'll create a video for it so that they can go back and they can do that. And then some people are still pen to paper. Even though we're talking about technology, there are still steps involved. So I usually try to pass out handwritten documents of the steps that we've just done for those people who process by seeing it in that way. So you just have to be very versatile and open to the fact that even though you're going to offer a number of different ways, that there still might not be people who are going to understand it. Keeping those office hours is a big one, and I definitely encourage all of my students to come and visit me whenever they want. And I also have a virtual office. So we use GoToMeeting in the classroom. And anytime that they have a question, working on their homework assignment, it's 8 p.m., they can send me a ping that lets me know that they need help. And we jump into the virtual meeting room and we can walk through things as well that way. Yes?
Hello.
Hi.
My question is, how does one remain current with what's emerging in new technologies when a lot of us tend to get stuck in what we normally do and we don't know what we don't know? And so how would one remain on top of new developments and things that they could possibly introduce in this way to a learning environment at a law school, not necessarily at a firm, so that we could keep students in contact with that new technology and provide the training that you're suggesting?
Yeah, so pretty much every platform that we have access to also just automatically give us access to their newsletters. So that was a big thing. You can sift through the email if you want, but some of it was very beneficial because they also partner with so many other providers. So we will get notifications about what's trending in this particular practice area. Hey, it might be time for you to switch over to your new platform because now we're seeing that this is the leader. So allowing some of the platforms to do a little bit of that work for yourself, for you. But then, you probably have an idea of the percentage of students that are going to go on to a particular location and be gainfully employed. But that's where that partnership really comes into play with the employers, asking them what they're using. So even though it might not necessarily be the leader, it's the leader in that particular market, and that being very important. So that's why we did decide to, go with some of the platforms because they told us that's what they wanted them to know. We don't necessarily care that it's not number 1, but it's number 4, and it's working for us right now. So please, if you have the ability, implement that. And I also charge my students. I say, hey, if you guys find something that you think is going to be beneficial, or as I mentioned, some of them are already working in the legal field and they're using things that we're not training them on. If you tell me what they are, I'll try and find a way to incorporate that into the classroom so that other people can see it. When I attended actually the conference last year, the ABA conference, I was able to meet with a number of different people that we don't have the money financially to have all these platforms in the classroom, but they did do some virtual training for us. So that's another way too. Come to these conferences and see if they'd be willing just to speak for 20 minutes and talk about some of the different platforms available. Any other questions?
And I think we might actually have to wrap up
We're good?
questions
Okay.
because we're coming to the end here.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all very much for your time today.